It's your boy Tony from Black Thought, and I'm back at it again with another video. This is going to be a series all about Biden's plan for Black America and what it actually looks like. I want to make sure that everyone knows it. So if you don't already know the plan, and you're Black, it truly will affect you. And so I'm going to teach you it. I'm going to tell you all about it. And then the goal will be to keep him to his word. So Biden's plan for Black America. Stick around. Let's go. So starting off, I'm going to talk about his criminal justice plan, because that is probably the biggest thing with Black America right now, what we face and have to deal with on a daily basis. So starting with incarceration. Part of his plan is to reduce the number of folks incarcerated. He does not exactly explain how he's going to do this. There's no actual substance to how he plans to do that. I honestly don't have too much to tell you there. That's good for the Black community though, because we have a lot of people that look like me and you are in those jails or in the private jail system and things like that. So that essentially will be good if he can get it done. Now, moving on, he wants to focus on redemption and rehabilitation over recidivism. See, right now, people who enter the criminal justice system, they enter jail, they tend to go back. He wants to focus on redeeming those people and rehabilitating those people so that they do not come back to jail. Biden wants to stop the profiteering off of the folks who are incarcerated. So for example, in a lot of the private jail systems around the country, what happens is the 13th Amendment gets invoked, in which slavery is permitted so long as it's on the basis of someone who's incarcerated. So what happens is large corporations will go to jails and say, hey, make these products for me. We'll pay you this amount of money. And then little to nothing of that money goes back to the actual people working on these things that the jail forces them to work on, mind you. So essentially, it's kind of like modern day slavery. And by kind of like, I mean, it is modern day slavery. Biden wants to stop that. Now, this one coming up is probably a big one that a lot of us are hoping for. But it doesn't, I'm gonna be honest with you, it's not as bold as a lot of what we thought. So he wants to reinstate the pattern or practice investigations, which basically are investigations to determine whether or not there's a systemic problem in policing and in prosecutorial offices, prosecutors' offices, in terms of, are they over-policing certain communities? Are they applying force in an unequitable fashion? Are prosecutors targeting Black boys and girls? Things like that. That's what the pattern or practice investigations are for. Traditionally what they have done. And they are used as a part of the Department of Justice. So they have that power to kind of handle those investigations. What happens after those investigations is what we're gonna look for in terms of bold, actual, integral, systematic changes to get rid of those things. For example, if we know there's over-policing in certain areas and the pattern of practice investigation yields those results, something has to be done to change it. This one's a really big one when it comes particularly to the Black community, because it has to deal with us in the court system. He wants to invest in the public defender's office. If you don't know what the public defender's office is, good. I don't want you to know what it is. Try to stay as far away from it as you can. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to tell you, a public defender's office is essentially the lawyers that represent defendants who could not pay for their own private lawyer. You ever heard the phrase, if you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed to you? That's the public defender's office. Generally, they primarily serve the Black community, as more often than not, Black kids and Black adults cannot afford to pay for their own private lawyer to defend them, so they go to the public defender's office. He wants to invest more money in those public defender's offices so that they can hire more lawyers, so that they can have more resources to defend Black and brown kids, so that they can better defend Black and brown kids. Essentially, it's a direct benefit to Black and brown, if not almost direct. This next one is really important. He wants to abolish mandatory minimums. You may have heard about mandatory minimums. In fact, Joe Biden's kind of the reason, well, not kind of the reason, he did have a part in installing mandatory minimums across the country because he served as a senator, but that's neither here nor there. Right now, he wants to abolish mandatory minimums. In fact, he's going to create a $20 billion grant that can go out to every state that's meant to incentivize those states to have better practices and do better database things that are toward lessening the number of crime and the percentage of crime and the number of incarcerated. A tenet of that grant for a state to get this $20 billion grant, that's no small chunk of change, but for them to get that amount of money, they have to abolish their mandatory minimums. So that's going to be a good thing because those have directly hurt the Black community. It's probably one of the biggest drivers to mass incarceration across the Black community, point blank, period. So that I'm excited to see. I hope that goes across all the states. It will be a federal thing. So if you ever end up in a federal court, there will no longer be any mandatory minimums. But in state courts, that's where the issue is going to come up because that's where a lot of the stuff is kind of hashed out too. So we'll see what happens there. Part of Biden's plan is also to decriminalize cannabis, the use of cannabis, as well as expunge all those who were convicted, all those cannabis convictions. So anyone who was in jail or got a conviction on the specific, I don't mean like, for example, they were selling weed or something like that and they pistol whipped somebody. No, I mean like specifically people who were just smoking in their car or something. They will have their records expunged, as well as that no longer will be a criminal charge, basically. Now, if you do something outside of that, for example, if you have, I don't know, like a couple ounces of weed and you rob a store, right, while you were high or something, I don't know, that is a lot different. You would go to jail for that. But if it was strictly on the basis of cannabis usage, for example, smoking outside your garage, no longer will be a crime. Now, that being said, he also wants to kind of decriminalize, or not decriminalize, he wants to send folks who are grabbed by police officers on the basis of drug use. Instead of sending them straight to jail, he wants to send them to drug courts and then rehabilitation. Now, if you are using crack cocaine, right, and you get into a fight or you start damaging property and stuff, that's different. You will go to jail for that. But if you just so happen to be caught using crack cocaine and that's all you were doing, having a bad trip in an alley or something, I don't know, then you're gonna go to a drug court and then most likely a rehabilitation center. Because as I said earlier, he wants to prioritize redemption and rehabilitation over recidivism. This one's gonna be a big one. Okay, Biden also wants to end the cash bail system. If you don't know what the cash bail system is, again, good on you, stay far away from it. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to tell you. The cash bail system is simply a system that kind of benefits the rich and hurts the poor. So you've probably heard of the term bail. You know, when you get arrested, you get put on bail. You can get put on bail so long as you pay a certain fee. So for example, let's say I robbed someone and then I got a, I don't know, $10,000 bail set, right? I can, instead of spending my time in jail, I can get $10,000, pay my bail, and then just be out until my court date. Essentially what he wants to do is end that system because rich folks could do it like that. Poor folks, they had to go out to lenders who targeted them for predatory loans of like 18,000% interest and things like that. So he wants to get rid of that. Not only that, but if you were poor and you couldn't get one of those loans, then you essentially just stayed in jail. And so taxpayer dollars are benefiting, or not benefiting you, but taxpayer dollars were supporting you while they didn't need to because you were in jail, even though you haven't been convicted, like you haven't got that guilty yet, basically. So now, essentially, everyone will just be out until their court date, is my assumption, rather than having the ability to simply pay a fine or pay their bail and then leave. For example, I think the killer in Kenosha, the Kenosha kid, I think his bail was like $1 million or something like that, or $2 million, and he paid the bail. He got the money to pay the bail, and so he was out back on the streets again, something like that. So there's a good example for it. Whereas black kids and black boys and girls, they will commit one thing. It was a non-violent thing, and yes, it was a stupid mistake, but they didn't know, they're kids, and then they can't pay a $5,000 bail. You know what I mean? And they got to stay in that jail cell until their court date. So essentially, that's kind of what it's targeting. And one of the other major tenets of his plan when it comes to criminal justice is restoring the right to vote to felons. He wants to restore the right to vote to felons. And instead of felons, I'm going to say returning citizens. He wants to restore the right to vote to returning citizens across the country. He himself cannot do this. However, he is incentivizing states to do this. He's gonna work to push states to do this. I'm not sure how he's gonna incentivize it just yet. I'm not sure he's gonna work to do that just yet. But his goal will be to incentivize states toward restoring the right to felons to vote. This will open up an entirely new voting bloc across mostly the east side of the country. Places like Georgia, Florida, the Carolinas, Virginia, places with heavy black populations, Oakland, so on and so forth. That'll open up an entirely new voting bloc. And I live in Florida. We passed Amendment 4 on our past midterm in 2018. However, and it gave returning citizens the right to vote. However, our legislature basically threw our opinions as citizens, because we voted in, not the legislature, not the governor. They threw our opinion, our amendments out the window, and basically just said, screw you guys. Now Joe Biden's gonna work to give returning citizens the right to vote across the board. I hope this was a good video. I hope you learned about Joe Biden's plan when it comes to the criminal justice system. There are a few other things I did and didn't mention. The only reason I didn't mention them is because I didn't see the impact necessarily that it would have, or I don't want to make the video too long too, because there's like a lot of stuff. But so I tried to get the major things, and then I didn't want to, and then there were some things that just didn't matter, basically. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Drop a like, drop a comment if you have any questions. I'll be answering any questions. And most definitely hit that subscribe button. Peace. Oh, follow me on Instagram at blackthought, spelled BLK.thought.